When Princess Brina entered the first ballroom she'd been allowed to attend in 10 years, she knew for a fact that it was her stepfather who must have drugged her. However, she couldn't have known she would end up fainting into the arms of none other than the Alpha King. The room spun lazily around her, the chandeliers blurring into streaks of golden light. Her limbs felt heavy, languid, like she was moving through honey. Each step required conscious effort, and her thoughts came slow and thick. "What's wrong with me?" she whispered, though her voice sounded distant even to her own ears. King Consort Oberon's grip tightened on her arm as he guided her across the dance floor. His smile was cold and calculating, the smile of a snake watching a mouse stumble into its coils. "You said you wanted to come to the ball, darling." His voice dripped with false concern. "You were very firm about it, in fact." Brina's eyelids drooped. She fought to keep them open, fought to keep her spine straight. "I feel dizzy. Perhaps you should return to your room, my love." Oberon's fingers trailed up her arm, possessive and sickening. He played with a strand of her blonde hair, winding it around his finger like a chain. "Don't call me that," Brina managed, though the words came out slurred. Her head lolled forward, and she jerked it back with tremendous effort, refusing to let it fall against his shoulder. She would rather collapse on the floor than seek comfort from this monster. "You know how I feel about you, Princess," Oberon murmured, low enough that the dancing couples around them couldn't hear. "How I've always felt." "I know how you feel about the throne," Brina said, each word a struggle. "And it will never be yours." His grip turned bruising. "It will be when you become my wife. You are already mine, Brina. I intend to keep you." "You were my mother's husband!" The protest came out weak, pathetic. She hated how powerless she sounded. "And you are your mother's daughter," Oberon said, his breath hot against her ear. "Just as beautiful, just as valuable." "You killed her!" The accusation hung between them, dangerous and true. "You can't prove that, darling." His smile widened. "No one can." A nobleman approached, bowing low. "Your Majesty, if I might have a word about the trade agreements." "Of course, Lord Pemberton." Oberon's tone shifted to one of gracious authority as he released Brina's arm to clasp the Lord's hand. Brina swayed, nearly stumbling, but managed to take a step back, then another, slipping into the press of dancing couples before Oberon could notice. She'd fought so hard to be included tonight, had begged and pleaded and finally thrown a tantrum worthy of a child just to be allowed out of her gilded cage. Tonight's mating ceremony, the union between the Alpha King's younger sister and Duke Ashford, had drawn nobles from across her human kingdom and dignitaries from the neighboring shifter realm. The ballroom glittered with both her people and the wolf shifters, those magical beings who could transform between man and beast. Allies, she'd thought desperately. Someone here must be willing to help me. One of the visiting shifters, perhaps, or a noble who remembers my mother. Someone must see that Oberon is a monster. The room tilted violently. Brina grabbed at a passing server's tray for balance but missed, her fingers closing on air. Where was she? What was she doing? The thoughts scattered like startled birds, impossible to catch. Faces blurred past, laughing, drinking, dancing. Human nobles in their silk and jewels. Shifter warriors with their unnaturally bright eyes and predatory grace. None of them cared that a human princess was being held prisoner in her own palace. None of them cared that a dark mage had bewitched her mother, married her for the throne, and then slowly poisoned her over the course of 2 years. None of them would care when Oberon announced their engagement later, when she'd be too drugged to refuse. The room tilted violently. Brina stumbled backward, trying to catch herself, but her feet wouldn't cooperate. She crashed into something solid. A chair, she thought dimly, and then she was falling, tumbling gracelessly into someone's lap. "Easy there," said a voice. Strong hands steadied her, keeping her from sliding right off onto the floor. "Are you all right?" Brina blinked slowly, trying to make sense of where she was. She'd somehow ended up curled sideways in a chair, her head resting against a very broad, very warm chest. She tilted her face up, struggling to focus. The man holding her had the most incredible eyes, deep green, like emeralds catching the light, bright and luminous in a way no human eyes could be. "Your eyes," she mumbled, her hand lifting weakly as if to touch his face before dropping back down. "They're really pretty." His brows drew together as he studied her face, his grip on her arms tightening slightly. "Miss?" His voice was urgent now, worried. "Are you feeling all right?" Brian nodded, already sinking deeper into his warmth, her body instinctively curling closer like a cat seeking heat. A small, contented sound escaped her throat as she nuzzled against his chest. His whole body went rigid with surprise, then his arms shifted, cradling her more securely against him. "Hey, stay with me," he said, his tone almost pleading now. He gave her a gentle shake. "Don't—" But her eyes were already drifting closed, heavy as stones. "Someone get a physician," he commanded sharply, his voice cracking like thunder through the ballroom. "Now!" Brina barely heard him. She was already gone, snuggled against a stranger's chest like she belonged there, tumbling down into warm darkness where nothing could hurt her. She felt protected for what felt like the first time in forever. Then everything went black. Chapter 1. Brina woke to unfamiliar softness beneath her cheek. She tried to sit up, but the room spun violently, tilting sideways in a dizzying wave that left her breathless. "Easy," a deep voice murmured, smooth and calm. "Take it slow. You've been unconscious for quite a while." Brina blinked hard until the blur of her surroundings began to settle into shape. Tall windows drenched in moonlight, a fire crackling in the hearth, walls dressed in rich tapestries. This wasn't her chamber. Here. Something cool brushed her lips. A cup. Drink. Small sips. The voice carried authority softened by care. So she obeyed, her dry throat welcoming the first cool mouthful. Only when she lowered the cup did she look up at the man properly, and the sight stole her breath. He wasn't beautiful in the fragile polish of courtiers who posed before mirrors. His beauty was something older, carved rather than painted. Strong jaw, high cheekbones, dark hair that fell in loose waves to his shoulders, and deep, verdant green which seemed to gather all the light in the room and hold it captive. She knew those eyes. She'd seen them before, right before stumbling backward at the ball, falling into a chair. No, not a chair. A lap. "Oh, gods. Are you the physician?" she asked, hoping that she hadn't humiliated herself in front of someone important. The man laughed, a rich, genuine sound that rippled through the air. "No, my name is Carden." He set the cup aside. "I was there when you fainted yesterday, at the ball. You dropped into my lap, remember?" Brina's face flamed. She had curled against him like a drowsy cat. "I apologize, my lord," she rushed out, mortification tumbling over itself. I wasn't—" "It's quite all right," Carden interrupted gently. "Truly, I didn't mind." She searched his face for mockery or judgment, but found none. He looked as if he truly meant it, that he hadn't minded holding a stranger who had nearly fallen apart in his arms. They stared at each other then, time stretching thin between heartbeats. Brina found she couldn't look away. There was something magnetic about him, as if the whole room leaned subtly in his direction. "How are you feeling now?" he asked, his voice a low thread of concern. "Would you like something to eat?" She shook her head quickly, unable to tear her gaze away from the way the firelight caught his hair. "No, you're not fine?" His smile tilted playfully. "Or no, you're not hungry?" "I'm fine," Brina managed, but the words faltered as Carden leaned closer, close enough for his breath to stir a lock of her hair. His hand rose, brushing her cheek with the backs of his fingers. "What are you doing?" she asked, sounding eager rather than protesting. I'm sorry. His voice dropped lower, intimate now. It seems I can't help myself. His thumb traced the gentle line of her cheekbone, a single, reverent stroke, and her pulse stumbled beneath it. I don't know him, she thought wildly. This is madness. And yet she felt no threat in him, only an inexplicable familiarity, as if her body had known him long before her mind caught up. His hand slid from her cheek to her neck, his touch steady and sure. Then, unexpectedly, he pressed his wrist against her throat, rubbing gently. Once, twice, 3 times. What are you doing? She asked again, her voice soft, unsteady. Scent marking you, he replied, the words coming like something instinctive as his wrist moved to the other side of her neck, slower this time. Oh, Brina said. His face was so close she could feel the warmth of his breath brushing her skin. You're a shifter, she observed. His eyes met hers, green and impossibly alive. I am, he confirmed. Are you part of the king's party? She asked. The Alpha King's retinue? Something like that, he murmured, and a shadow of a smile curved his mouth. But enough about me. Tell me your name, he requested. Please. His gaze searched her face, as if committing it to memory. Brina, she replied, barely more than a breath. His eyes widened. Like the princess? She nodded, unable to look away. You're the Princess Brina? Carden repeated, surprise flickering across his expression. The heir to Eldoria? She nodded, and confusion crossed his face, a flash of thought behind those green eyes. Why she was here? Why her stepfather had left her in another's care? What game might be at play? Brina felt the shift in him and, desperate, seized upon it. This could be her chance, her only chance. If he was part of the Alpha King circle, he might be able to help. Please. She reached for him without thinking. Can you help me? His expression changed at once, all teasing gone. Of course, he said quietly. The promise in his voice felt real, solid. Anything. Tell me what you need. Her throat tightened. She melted into his touch, too grateful, too relieved to be embarrassed by her own need for him. I need to get a message to King Cassius, she pleaded. The Alpha King, it's urgent. Carden frowned slightly. Cassius isn't king anymore, he told her. He passed the crown to his son 3 years ago. 3 years. The words made her freeze. She had been locked away for so long, the world had changed without her even knowing. Heat crept into her cheeks. Carden must think her a fool now, or worse, unhinged. What kind of princess didn't know something so basic? Oberon had kept her ignorant, purposefully. The edges of her vision swam. Brina. Carden's other hand rose to cradle her face. Please don't be afraid. You are not alone anymore. Not while I draw breath. His thumb brushed her cheekbone, impossibly gentle after that fierce declaration. Whatever darkness haunts you, whatever cage they've built around you, I will tear it down. I swear on my soul, on everything I am, no one will hurt you again. Something inside her cracked open and tears burned at the corners of her eyes. Really? She asked, the words full of hope. I swear it, Carden said, lifting her hand and pressing his lips to her knuckles, his eyes never leaving hers. The gesture was courtly, reverent, so achingly sincere it stole her breath. But why? She whispered. You don't even know me. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper, thick with wonder. My soul knows you. He pressed her palm flat against his chest, right over his heart. From the moment you fell into my arms, everything in me recognized you. My heart beat your name. His other hand cradled her face. You're my mate, Brina. The other half of my soul. Brina blinked, her mind struggling to process the weight of his words. You're... what? She asked, confused. She hadn't been well taught in shifters' customs. What exactly was a mate to them? The door burst open, interrupting her thought. A man in fine clothes stood in the doorway, urgency sharp in his voice. "You need to come," he told Carden. "Now." The latter tensed, his jaw tightening. "Not now," he snapped. "It can't wait," his friend insisted. "Please, the guard will stay here. She'll be safe." Cardan's conflict showed plainly, the muscles in his hands flexing. Brina's heart squeezed at the sight. He barely knew her, yet he hesitated to go. "It's all right," she said softly. "You can leave. Thank you for your kindness." Their eyes met and held, the pull between them stretching taut and bright. Slowly, as if drawn by gravity, they leaned closer. She could feel his breath against her lips, warm, uneven. The man in the doorway cleared his throat loudly. Carden exhaled, the tension in him a visible shiver. "I'll be just a moment," he murmured against her ear. "I promise." "All right," she whispered. He squeezed her hand once, hard, as though imprinting the feel of her into his skin, then rose and strode to the door. Then he was gone. For a long time, Brina sat motionless, her hand still warm where he had held it. The world seemed to have changed shape around that absence. "Mate." The word echoed through her mind, trembling and bright. What did it mean? And why did every part of her want to chase after him, to call him back? The door slammed open again. Oberon strode in, his face a mask of fury, his guards flanking him like wolves closing on prey. "Come with me," he snarled. "Now!" Chapter 2. The guards dragged Brina back to her chambers and threw her inside. She stumbled, catching herself against her vanity as the door slammed shut behind her. Oberon stood by the window, his back to her, hands clasped behind him. The picture of calm control. That terrified her more than rage would have. "Do you have any idea," he said softly, "how much patience I've exercised with you?" Brina's heart hammered. "Let me go. You have no right to keep me here." "I have every right." He whirled on her, and there was the fury she'd expected, cold and venomous. "I married your mother for this kingdom. I endured years of her simpering affection, her tedious company, all for the crown that should have been mine by now." "You'll never have it," Brina spat. "The nobles would never accept you." "They'll accept my wife." He crossed the room in 3 strides, gripping her chin hard enough to bruise. "Which is what you'll become, willingly or not. I'll tell everyone. I'll tell them you poisoned her. Who will believe you?" His smile was cruel. "The grief-mad princess who's been locked away for 5 years. They already think you're unstable, darling. I've made sure of it." The truth of it hit her like a fist. He'd isolated her so completely, for so long. Who would believe her word over his? "You killed her," she whispered, tears burning her eyes. "You murdered my mother." "I freed myself from a tedious obligation." He released her chin with a shove. "Just as I'm about to free myself from another." He pulled something from his robes, a small vial filled with black liquid that seemed to writhe in the glass. Brina backed away. "What is that?" "Insurance." His eyes gleamed with malicious satisfaction. "You think that shifter beast will save you? That he'll come charging to your rescue?" He uncorked the vial. "Let's see if he still wants you after this." "No!" Brina tried to run, but he caught her wrist, yanking her back. He spoke words in a language that made her ears ring, made her bones ache. The black liquid rose from the vial like smoke, coiling through the air toward her face. "Stop!" she thrashed, but his grip was iron. The smoke wrapped around her head like a shroud, burning cold against her skin. It sank into her pores, her eyes, her mouth. Pain exploded through her. Her skin stretched and sagged. Her bones creaked. her hair thinned and grayed. When it stopped, she collapsed to the floor, gasping. Oberon hauled her up by her hair and shoved her toward the mirror. Brina looked and screamed. The face staring back at her was ancient, deeply lined, sagging, with yellowed teeth and milky eyes. Liver-spotted hands, gnarled with arthritis. She looked 70, 80 years old. "You'll remain like this until someone chooses you," Oberon hissed, his smile vicious. "Until someone picks you in this wretched form, over 100 other beautiful women. Until someone looks at a room full of youth and beauty and chooses the crone instead." He laughed cruelly. "And we both know that will never happen. Since only I know who you really are, only I can break the curse." He released her and she crumpled, staring at her withered hands in horror. "I'll give you time to think about my proposal," he said, adjusting his robes. "I trust you'll be more amenable to marriage now." The door clicked shut behind him. Brina knelt on the floor, trembling. What was she going to do? Carden had promised to help Princess Brina. Beautiful, young Princess Brina. Not this. Not an old hag who looked like she belonged in a grave. The door opened. Brina's head snapped up, hope flaring, but it was just a servant girl coming to collect the dinner tray. The girl froze when she saw Brina. "Who are you? What are you doing in the princess's chambers?" Brina opened her mouth, but no words came. The servant didn't recognize her, didn't see Princess Brina at all. "Out!" The girl advanced on her, shooing her like a stray cat. "Out at once, before I call the guards." Brina stumbled to her feet, backing toward the door. The servant didn't know her. No one would know her. Wait. No one would know her. This was her chance. The chance she'd been waiting 5 years for. She could walk right out of this palace and no one would stop an old woman. No one would care. She hesitated. Carden had promised to help her. He'd sworn to protect her. But where was he? Oberon could return any moment. The window for escape was closing. "I said out!" The servant grabbed her arm. Brina yanked free and fled into the hallway. No one stopped her. Guards looked right through her. Servants stepped aside without really seeing her. She was invisible, just another old woman shuffling through the castle. She made her way down to the kitchens, and the cook barely glanced at her when she slipped out the servants' entrance into the cool night air. Freedom was right there, just beyond the palace gates. But Carden? No. She couldn't think about him. This was survival. This was the escape she'd dreamed of for years. She hurried through the darkened streets toward the market square. At dawn, farmers would come with their carts, heading back to their villages. She just needed to stay hidden until then. A few hours later, she approached an old farmer loading empty crates onto his wagon. "Please," she croaked, her new voice rough and ancient. "I need passage to the next village. I can pay." She pulled a ring from her finger, her mother's ring. Thank the gods Oberon hadn't thought to take it yet. The farmer squinted at it. "It's the tiniest ring I've ever seen. No grown finger could fit through that." Brina held up her gnarled hand and slipped the ring back in. It fit perfectly. "The ruby is very rare," she said. "From the southern mines. It's worth far more than a simple ride." "Aye, that it is," the farmer said. "Get in the back, grandmother." Brina climbed into the cart, settling among the crates as the wagon lurched forward. Only then, as the palace disappeared behind her and the road stretched endlessly ahead, did she let herself think of Carden. "I'm sorry," she thought, watching the sky lighten to pink and gold. She'd left without a word. He'd think she'd abandoned him, or worse, that she'd never trusted him at all. She forced the thoughts away. Freedom mattered more than fairy tales, more than handsome strangers with impossible promises. And yet she couldn't stop seeing his face, couldn't stop feeling the phantom warmth of his hands cradling her cheeks. Chapter 3. 5 months of mucking pig pens had taught Brina that freedom smelled like manure and tasted like regret. She dumped another bucket of slop into the trough, ignoring the way the pigs squealed and shoved at each other. Her back ached. Her hands were cracked and bleeding. The stench clung to her clothes, her hair, her skin. No amount of washing in the cold stream could ever fully remove it. "Oi, crone!" A young man passed by with his friends, all of them laughing. "You missed a spot! Or maybe that's just your face." They dissolved into laughter, slapping each other's backs. Brina kept her head down and continued working. It didn't matter. None of it mattered. "I don't know why the pigs don't eat her," one of the girls tittered. "She smells worse than they do." More laughter, always more laughter. This was her life now. The village outcast. The disgusting old woman who cleaned pig pens because no one else would hire her and lived in a shack at the edge of the woods. Gods. That shack. She hadn't spent one good night there in 5 months, tormented by the cold seeping through the rotting walls and the sounds of nocturnal animals reaching her dreams. In her nightmares, one particular wolf chased her through endless forests, its eyes gleaming in the darkness, its howls full of such desperate anguish it made her wake with tears on her cheeks. "At least we can shift if we need to run from danger," a woman had sneered at her last week at the market. "What can you do, human? Hobble away on your old legs?" The crowd had roared with laughter, and Brina sighed. The mockery she could survive, the filth, the exhaustion, the bone-deep loneliness, she could bear it all. This life was still better than being Oberon's prisoner. At least here she could walk under open sky. At least here she was free. If only the freedom didn't feel so empty. Because worse than all of it, worse than the mocking and the pig filth and the aching muscles, was the hollow ache in her chest that grew with each passing day. She thought about Carden constantly, obsessively. His green eyes haunted her dreams. She'd wake reaching for arms that weren't there, remembering the feeling of safety she'd known for one brief, perfect moment in his embrace. It was torture. "I barely knew him," she told herself every morning. "We spoke for minutes. He's forgotten me by now." But she couldn't forget him. Couldn't stop replaying every word, every touch, every look. The way he'd cradled her face. The way he'd said, "My soul knows you," like it was the most important truth in the world. She'd come to this village, this specific village on the border of the Shifter Kingdom, because she had hoped she might see him again. That she might have traveled to the capital eventually, found a way to get close to the palace, where he hopefully attended court. But 5 months later, she had no money, no plan, no way to travel. Though, she kept dreaming of a man she'd known for 10 minutes. Foolish, she thought bitterly, scrubbing at the pen walls. "You're being foolish." "Big news!" A boy came running through the village square, shouting at the top of his lungs. "The king is coming! The Alpha King! 3 days from now!" Brina's hands stilled on the brush. The village erupted. People poured out of shops and homes, chattering excitedly. "It's a hunting party!" someone shouted. "His Majesty is coming here," another voice called out. "We'll have a festival with music and dancing," a woman said. "I heard he's still unmated," Mara said dreamily. "Maybe he'll choose one of our girls." Her friend laughed. "Don't be ridiculous, Mara. Why would the king want a village girl?" "Stranger things have happened," Mara insisted. Brina stood frozen in the pig pen, her heart hammering so hard she could barely breathe. The king was coming, and Carden had been at the mating ceremony. He'd been important enough to attend, to have his own chambers. He must know the king. He might even be part of the royal retinue. He could be coming here, to this village, in 3 days. She might see him again. The thought made her dizzy. Her hands trembled as she gripped the fence rail. "He won't recognize you," the rational part of her mind whispered. "Even if he comes, even if you see him, he'll look right through you like everyone else." But maybe she could watch him from afar. Maybe just seeing him, knowing he was real and well and alive, would be enough to ease this aching void in her chest. "Look at the crone!" someone called out, laughing. "Even she's excited. Think the king will notice you, old woman?" The crowd around the square burst into laughter. "Maybe she'll try to court him," another voice mocked. "Can you imagine that?" someone else added with a sneer. Brina didn't care. Let them laugh, let them mock. She was used to it by now. 3 days. In 3 days, she might see Carden again. What if he's forgotten me? The thought crept in, cold and cruel. What if he never thinks of me at all? What if I was just another moment in his day, easily dismissed, already replaced? It didn't matter, she told herself firmly. It didn't matter if he'd forgotten. She just needed to see him, just once. Soon. Chapter 4. Brina'd never seen the villagers so animated. They'd spent all morning cooking, cleaning, primping. The women wore their finest dresses. The men had actually bathed. Now, banners hung from every building. Abels groaned under the weight of roasted meats, and flowers decorated doorways and windows. Around noon, a cry went up from the village entrance. "They're here! The king is here!" it said. The crowd surged forward, a tide of excitement, and Brina pressed herself against the wall, craning her neck to see. There was the thunder of hooves, the excited yips and howls, and then the village erupted in cheers as she saw them approach, a procession of horses and wolves moving as one coordinated unit. And at the front, on a magnificent black stallion, rode Carden. Brina's breath stopped in her throat. He was even more beautiful than she remembered, sitting tall in the saddle, smiling at the crowd with easy charm as he raised a hand in greeting, and the villagers nearly trampled each other trying to get closer. Was he waving at her? Her heart soared for one impossible, foolish moment. Then she saw it. The gleam of gold on his head. A crown, simple but unmistakable, resting in his dark hair. "Long live King Carden!" someone shouted. "Our Alpha King," another voice joined in. Brina took an involuntary step back. King Carden? He was the king? Why didn't he tell me? She thought, confused. But then again, why would he? She'd been nobody. A drugged princess he'd found for 5 minutes before her stepfather dragged her away. She felt so monumentally foolish. She'd been dreaming about a man who ruled an entire kingdom, who had hundreds of nobles and warriors at his command, who could have anyone he wanted with a snap of his fingers. And she, to make matters worse, she was an old crone who mucked pig pens. "Did you see him?" A girl gushed to her friends, fanning herself dramatically. "He's even more handsome than the stories say." "I'm going to make sure he notices me at the feast," her friend replied, adjusting her bodice. "You? He's going to notice me," a third girl argued. "I wore my mother's silk dress." Brina shrank further into the shadows, unable to look away. Carden dismounted with fluid grace, greeting the village elder with what looked like genuine warmth. "Why is the crone staring?" a voice sneered nearby. Brina flinched but didn't turn. "Look at her," someone else laughed, hiding in the shadows like she has any right to even look at him. "Think he'd want you, old woman?" a young man called out. Laughter rippled through the nearby crowd. Brina turned away, cheeks burning, and found a better hiding spot behind a stack of barrels. From here she could still see the square but was less visible herself. Long tables had been set up in the square, and the king was seated at the head as the feast began, his retinue around him. Servants rushed back and forth with platters and pitchers. Music played. People ate and drank and laughed with abandon. Brina didn't join them. She stayed hidden, watching Carden, and slowly began to notice things the celebrating villagers did not. Every so often, he'd press his fingers to his temple like his head ached, and his movements, usually so fluid and graceful like those of a shifter, had turned stiff, careful. He looked unwell, and her heart clenched with worry she had no right to feel. His head lifted suddenly, nostrils flaring slightly. Quickly, efficiently, his scanned the square until they landed exactly where she was hiding. Their gazes locked. Gasping, Brina pressed herself back against the wall, trying to disappear into the shadows. Carden rose from his chair, still staring at her hiding spot, or through it. She couldn't tell if he actually saw her or was looking at something else. The man beside him touched his arm, said something. Carden didn't seem to hear. He took a step toward her direction. The man grabbed his shoulder more firmly, pulling him back down. Carden blinked, shook his head slightly, and allowed himself to be seated again. But his hand trembled as he reached for his cup. He downed his drink in one long swallow, then immediately reached for more. Brina frowned, watched with growing concern as he drank, and drank, and drank some more. The man beside him tried to slow him down, but by the time the sun began its descent toward the horizon, Carden was swaying slightly in his seat, his eyes glassy. His friend finally had enough. He grabbed the cup from Carden's hand, said something sharp and low, then stood and addressed the crowd. "His Majesty announces the hunt will now begin," his friend announced, grabbing his cup from Carden's hand before saying something sharp and low to get his attention. The village roared with approval as Carden stood as well, his voice carrying authority even if slightly slurred. "Let the hunt commence," he announced. And then silence. Brina stood alone in the empty square, the feast still steaming on abandoned tables, the only human left in a village of wolves. She'd been foolish to hope Carden might think of her. Yet something twisted deep in her gut. Something was wrong with him. She could feel it. By the time she headed home, night had claimed the forest. The air pulsed with distant howls and the thud of paws. She kept her arms wrapped tight around herself as she walked. 10 minutes in, she felt it, that prickling between her shoulders. Watched. She turned. A massive wolf stood at the edge of the path, motionless in the dark. Her breath hitched. She walked faster. The wolf followed, unhurried, silent. Branches snapped behind her. Leaves whispered. The sound of her own heartbeat drowned everything else. Her shack appeared through the trees. She ran, stumbling, lungs burning. She risked a glance back, those green eyes still locked on her. She crashed through her door, slammed it shut, and pressed her weight against it. Her chest heaved. It was a shifter. It had to be. Someone's cruel joke. They'd laugh about the old woman panicking. Minutes passed. No sound. Then, knock, knock. Brina froze. Human knuckles. Another knock, calm, deliberate. She forced her shaking hands to undo the latch and cracked the door open. Carden stood there, naked, sweat-slick, trembling. His eyes were wild, glowing faintly green in the dark. "Brina," he breathed. Her heart stopped. Chapter 5. Carden stumbled past her into the shack, his eyes scanning the small space with unfocused intensity. "Where is she?" he asked. Brina blinked, trying very hard not to stare at his naked form, the broad shoulders, the lean muscles of his stomach. "Who?" she squeaked. "Brina," Carden said, turning around and swaying dangerously. "I tracked her here. Her scent, it's everywhere. Where is she?" The hope in her chest cracked. He didn't recognize her. But then again, she watched him scent the air like a hound on a trail, his nostrils flaring. He didn't recognize her, but he was looking for her, wasn't he? His movements were uncoordinated, clumsy. He swayed on his feet, catching himself against her table with both palms flat on the rough wood. "Maybe you should sit down," she said softly, reaching out. The moment her fingers made contact with his warm skin, Carden went completely still. He stared down at her gnarled hand, then slowly, his fingers wrapped around hers, so much larger, warmer, and he lifted her hand closer. "Carden?" she asked. His eyes met hers, glazed, struggling to focus, but they burned with something desperate and searching. A bead of sweat traced down his temple. "Sit down," she encouraged again, gentler this time. And he obeyed, sinking into her only chair with less grace than she'd ever seen from him. She grabbed her threadbare blanket from the bed and wrapped it around his shoulders, her hands brushing his bare skin as she arranged the fabric. She felt him shiver despite the heat pouring off him. "I've looked everywhere for her," he sighed, his head tilted back against the chair, exposing the long line of his throat. "I couldn't find her. 5 months. 5 months and nothing." Brina's hands trembled as she fetched her water bucket. "You mean Brina?" she asked, uncertain. She still couldn't quite believe it. He'd been searching for her all this time? "She's my mate," he slurred, the words thick with drink but absolutely certain. "Mine, and I lost her." There was that word again. Mate? He'd said it before, in the palace, right before they'd been interrupted. It meant something significant, she was sure of it now. Should she tell him? Explain that she was right here, that the curse had changed her appearance? She approached with the water, kneeling beside his chair. First, she needed to tend to his fever, she decided. "Here," she helped him, one hand cradling the back of his head. "Drink." He drank obediently, his eyes closed, dark lashes fanned against those flushed cheeks. As she pulled the cup away, she noticed something glinting against his chest. A chain. A delicate gold chain that seemed almost fragile against his collarbones and hanging from it. Her breath caught. Her mother's ring. The tiny ruby ring she'd given to the farmer, hanging right over his heart. "It's hers," Carden explained, following her gaze. With clumsy fingers, he lifted the chain over his head. For a moment, she thought he might give it to her, but instead he held it up for her to see, the ruby catching the dim light, gleaming like a drop of blood. Found the man she gave it to. Been carrying it ever since. His thumb rubbed over the small ruby, a gesture that looked habitual, like he'd touched it 1,000 times. Waiting to return it to her. He slipped the chain back over his head, tucking the ring against his chest where it belonged. Tears burned Brina's eyes. She turned away quickly, busying herself with building a fire in the small hearth. He'd found the farmer. He'd tracked down the ring. He'd been carrying it over his heart for months, touching it, thinking of her. He really has been looking for me, she thought, the realization overwhelming. All this time he's been looking. She was about to say something, but when she turned back, he looked almost ready to fall off his chair. She pressed her palm to his forehead, pushing back the damp strands of hair that clung to his skin. "You're ill," she said, worry tightening her throat. He was burning up, the heat of him almost scorching against her palm. Carden caught her hand before she could pull away, pressing it more firmly against his forehead with both of his hands. His eyes drifted closed, and something in his expression eased. His lips parted slightly as he exhaled, and she felt his breath against her wrist. "I feel much better now that you're here," he murmured, his voice rough and low. Then his head dropped forward onto the table with a soft thud, and he was out cold. "Carden?" Brina shook his shoulder gently. "Your Majesty?" "Nothing." He was unconscious, his breathing deep and labored. "Carden," she tried again, more urgently. "Please wake up." He mumbled something that sounded like her name, his brow furrowing even in sleep. "I'm right here," she whispered, smoothing his dark hair back from his fevered forehead. She spent the night at his side. He never fully woke, just murmured incoherently, her name falling from his lips again and again in different tones. She found herself talking to him, telling him things she'd never say if he were conscious, how she'd thought of him every day, how his face had been the only brightness in 5 months of darkness. As dawn light crept through the cracks in her walls, painting his skin gold, the door burst open. 3 men stormed in, 2 guards and Carden's friend from the feast, the one who'd tried to stop him from drinking. They all froze at the sight of their king slumped over a crone's table, blanket slipping off one bare shoulder. "What did you do to him?" the friend demanded, rushing to Cardan's side and gripping his shoulder. "I haven't done a thing," Brina protested. "I only gave him water." "He was quite drunk last night, my lord," one of the guards offered. "We all saw. Even so, he should have sobered by now." The friend pressed his hand to Cardan's forehead and swore. "He has a fever," Brina said. "He's had it all night." The guard sneered at her. "He's a shifter, and our king. He cannot have a fever." "And yet the old woman's right. We need to get him back to the castle," the friend interrupted, his face grim. The two guards moved to either side of Cardan, hauling him to his feet. Brina followed without thinking, her body moving before her mind could catch up. She couldn't let them take him. Something in her chest was screaming that they shouldn't be separated, that he needed her, that she needed. The friend stepped into her path, blocking the door. "What do you think you're doing, old hag?" Brina froze, mouth open, no words coming. What could she possibly say? His eyes narrowed as he studied her face. "Why did His Majesty come here? What did he want?" "He was looking for someone," Brina said carefully, asking after his mate. The friend went pale, his gaze darted to where Cardan hung between the guards. "What did you say exactly?" he asked. "That he'd been looking for her," Brina replied honestly. The friend cursed viciously and pushed past her out the door. "Move faster!" he called out. "We need to go now." "Wait!" Brina rushed after them, but they were already mounting horses. By the time she stumbled outside, squinting in the bright morning sun, they were already galloping away, a cloud of dust marking their retreat toward the distant castle. Chapter 6. Brina stood in the empty road long after the dust had settled, staring at the horizon where Cardan had vanished. Something was wrong with him. Deeply, terribly wrong. And every instinct screamed that only she could help. But how? She was nobody, an old crone who mucked pig pens. They'd never let her near the king. Exhaustion pulled at her bones as she trudged back to her shack. The sleepless night caught up to her, worry gnawing like a living thing. Please be all right, she thought, collapsing onto her bed. Please. When she opened her eyes again, darkness pressed close and heavy, like velvet draped over her skin. Had she slept all day? A sound outside froze her breath. Footsteps, slow, deliberate. Or hooves? Her heart leapt. Had Cardan's men returned? She hurried to the door and stepped outside. Mist rolled across the ground in thick waves. The air tasted strange, metallic. Even the trees looked wrong, bent into shapes she didn't recognize. Something moved within the fog. A wolf emerged, huge as a horse, its fur blacker than shadow, eyes burning red like embers. It growled, low and deep, and the sound vibrated through her bones. Brina turned to flee, but her shack was gone. Nothing behind her but mist and twisted trees. The wolf took a step forward. She ran. Branches tore at her arms as she stumbled through the fog. Heavy paws thundered behind her. She couldn't tell which way was forward. Every direction looked the same. Still she ran, lungs burning, heart pounding, the creature's breath brushing her neck. And then, something shifted. Her hands, outstretched before her, smoothed. Wrinkles vanished. Her legs grew strong. Her lungs filled easily. She was young again. The wolf was still behind her, closer now, its heat on her skin. She stopped, gasping. Realization bloomed sharp and bright. It's him. It had to be Cardan. And if it was Cardan, he wasn't hunting her. He was lost, sick, confused. He needed her. Slowly, Brina turned and opened her arms. It's all right, she whispered. The wolf burst through the mist and stopped. Red eyes flickered to green. It trembled, uncertain. Come here, Brina murmured. Step by step, it approached until it stood before her, massive and shuddering. She reached out, wrapped her arms around its neck, and pressed her face into the coarse black fur. "I've got you," she whispered. "You're safe." When she opened her eyes again, everything had changed. The mist was gone. She stood in a vast golden field beneath a twilight sky. Trees of gold swayed in a breeze that smelled like honey and summer. And in her arms, Carden. Whole, smiling. His hands cupped her face with aching tenderness. "Brina," he breathed, "I finally found you." Then he kissed her. His lips were warm and soft and desperate, and she kissed him back with everything she had. He kissed her cheeks, her forehead, her temple, her jaw, murmuring her name between each kiss, and she clung to him just as tightly, her fingers digging into his shoulders, afraid he might disappear. "I've been so worried about you," she said against his lips. "Why?" He kissed her again, unable to stop. "You were ill," she said, remembering. Carden paused, considering, then smiled against her mouth. "Well, I'm not at present," he declared. He pulled her close again, wrapping his arms around her waist and burying his face in her neck. "I've looked everywhere but couldn't find you, Brina. 5 months of searching and nothing." She hugged him back, breathing in his scent. This was too good to be true, too beautiful. "This is a dream, isn't it?" she murmured. "Yes," Carden said, "a shared dream. You're dreaming of me and I'm dreaming of you." "How is that possible?" Brina asked. "It's because we're mates." He pulled back to look at her, smiling. "Our souls reach for each other, even in sleep." Brina frowned. "You've said that word before, mates," she recalled. "What does it mean exactly?" Carden took her hand and began walking, pulling her gently along through the golden field. "It means you're the other half of my soul," he explained. "My perfect complement. The one person in all the world meant for me, and I for you." "But I'm not a shifter," Brina said softly. "No, and that's fortunate, actually." He squeezed her hand. "You'll feel our bond, but it won't affect you as strongly as it affects me, especially since I haven't claimed you yet. You won't get sick from our separation." The words hit her like cold water. "Wait," she stopped walking. "Are you sick because of our bond? Because of me?" "Not because of you," he said quickly, cupping her face. "It's because our bond has begun to form, but I haven't claimed you yet, and we've been apart. The bond is confused, incomplete." "And that's making you sick?" she asked. "Brina, please don't worry about this now," he said softly. She shook her head, furious. How could he ask that of her? "You're dying, aren't you?" she asked, voice small. Carden pulled her close, tucking her head under his chin. His arms wrapped around her like he could shield her from the truth. "Let's not think about that," he murmured into her hair. "Now that I've finally found you, I just want to enjoy you." Brina pushed him back gently to search his gaze. "But we need to talk about this," she said. "We need to figure out what to do." He kissed her, silencing her protest. And gods help her, she let him. She melted into his kiss, let herself pretend for just a moment that everything was fine, that they had all the time in the world. "Would you have me?" Carden asked, nuzzling her neck. "As your mate?" Joy burst through her chest, bright and overwhelming. She wanted to say yes, of course, but then she remembered. "I'm not sure you would have me," she said sadly. "What do you mean?" Carden cupped her face. "Of course I would. I've wanted nothing else since we met. But when you found me before," Brina hesitated, "you didn't recognize me." Carden frowned, his gaze distant as he searched his memory. Then his eyes widened. "That old woman in the woods," he said slowly. "That was you, wasn't it?" Brina gasped. "So you knew?" "I thought I was going mad," Carden replied. "And I was, being away from you. But when I found you in that cottage, I felt whole again. Better. Like I could finally think clearly for the first time in months. I wanted to say something, to understand why I felt that way. But you were too sick, Brina realized. She looked up at him, fear clawing at her throat. Carden, you're dying, aren't you? Tell me the truth. He didn't meet her gaze, but she felt the truth of it through whatever connection bound them. Tell me what to do. She grabbed his shirt, desperate. How can I help you? Only sealing our bond could help, he said quietly. Me claiming you, and you claiming me. How do we do that? Brina pleaded. Tell me, I'll come find you right now. If you come now, while I'm unconscious, they won't let you see me. Carden sighed. Frustration bled into his voice as he pulled her closer. And even if I wake and ask for you, he added, I'm worried my council will think I'm too ill to make sound decisions. They'll think you've bewitched me, made me confused. Especially since I won't look like myself, Brina sighed. They clung to each other in silence for a moment. Someone cursed you, Carden said after a beat. Who was it? My stepfather, Brina said, the words tasting like ash. He's been holding me captive for 5 years. He wants me to marry him to secure his place on the throne. The curse was meant to force my hand. I can only be freed if someone chooses to marry me, in this form, over 100 other women, and no one would do that for an old crone with no fortune. Carden smiled, fierce and certain. I would. I'd choose you over every woman in my kingdom. Tears burned Brina's eyes. If only there was a way for me to get inside the castle. For you to break my curse so your people would believe you when you declare me your mate. She thought of how she'd run, how she'd left him without a word. He'd been searching for her all this time, getting sicker and sicker. She remembered him clutching her mother's ring against his chest, carrying it over his heart. You even went through the trouble of finding my ring, she murmured sadly. Carden kissed her forehead. You have the tiniest fingers on earth, he joked. Do you know many friends begged me to try it on and none of their fingers could fit? Briar snorted. That's because it's enchanted, she said. Only I can wear it. The golden field began to blur around them, colors bleeding together like wet paint. What's happening? Brina clutched at him. I'm waking up, I think, Carden said, his voice distant. He looked devastated, his arms tightening around her. No, that's good, Brina said, grabbing his shoulders. It means you're feeling better? But even as she spoke, he was starting to fade, becoming translucent, and her heart sank in doubt. Carden, you are waking up, right? You're not dying? She was screaming the words into empty darkness. She jolted awake in her bed, tears streaming down her face, her arms still outstretched toward nothing. The shack was silent, dark, empty. Brina looked down at her gnarled, spotted hands and screamed in frustration. Chapter 7. 3 days passed like torture. Brina went through the motions, waking, walking to the pig pens, mucking the filth, enduring the mockery. But she barely heard the insults anymore. Her mind was far away, in a castle she'd never seen, with a man who might be dying. Or already dead. Look at the crone, someone laughed. She's not even listening. Brina dumped another bucket of slop and said nothing. Then, on the 3rd day, horses thundered into the village square. Castle guards, a dozen of them, in royal blue and silver. The entire village stopped and gathered, buzzing with curiosity. A messenger stepped forward, unfurling a scroll. Hear ye, a royal proclamation from His Majesty, Alpha King Carden. Brina's heart stopped. Her bucket clattered to the ground. He was alive. Carden was alive. By order of the king, the messenger continued, all women of the kingdom are summoned to the royal castle in 2 days' time. From among you, His Majesty will choose his bride. The square erupted. Women gasped and squealed. Men grumbled and laughed. Brina stood frozen, her mind racing. He was alive, and he was calling for all the women in the kingdom. Did he remember their conversation in the dream? Or was this something else? What if, in desperation to survive the bond sickness, he'd decided to try taking another mate? "How are we supposed to get there in 2 days?" someone called out. "Carriages will be sent to every village," the messenger replied. "All women who wish to attend must be ready by tomorrow evening." By evening, a line of carriages appeared at the village edge. Brina queued up behind a cluster of peasant girls, all dressed in their finest clothes. The men of the village had gathered to see them off, jeering. "Why do you bother?" one called out. "Kings don't marry common girls." "He asked for all women," a dark-haired girl shot back. Then she caught sight of Brina shuffling toward the carriage line, and her face twisted in horror. "What are you doing, crone?" Brina gave her best gap-toothed smile. "All the women, you said." The girl scowled and turned away, muttering something that sounded like disgusting. Brina climbed into the last carriage, wedging herself into a corner. She ignored them all, staring out the window as the village disappeared. "Please let him remember," she prayed. By midday the next day, the carriages rolled up to the Alpha King's castle. Brina's breath caught. Towering stone walls rose toward the sky, topped with blue and silver banners. Towers stretched up like reaching fingers, and the main gates were tall enough to let giants through. The carriages emptied into a massive courtyard already packed with women. Hundreds of them. Noble ladies in silk, merchant daughters in wool, servants in plain cotton. Palace attendants rushed around with ledgers, trying to organize the chaos. "Kitchen girls to the back," one yelled. "Maids go first, and please go ahead, my lady." He bowed as a noblewoman swept past. "How many more are we supposed to welcome?" a guard asked. "There must be hundreds here already." Hundreds, Brina thought. Hundreds of women for him to choose from. Could he have remembered? Was Carden asking them all here so he could choose her above all the others, breaking her curse? Hope flared bright in her chest. The crowd surged toward the castle entrance. Brina found herself pushed to the far edge of the courtyard. She tried to join the line, but a guard stepped in front of her. "Out of the way, old crone." "But the king said all women," Brina protested. "He said all women, not all old grannies." The guard looked her up and down with disgust. "How would you even bear him an heir? Don't be stupid. Move along." Brina's teeth ground together. She watched helplessly as ladies, girls, servants, and peasants streamed past her into the castle, but she was kept firmly away from the door. Maybe Carden didn't remember the dream at all. Maybe he was just looking for any mate to save himself. That didn't mean she shouldn't try to reach him. But how? 2 young noblewomen emerged from the castle entrance. "Who could even wear that thing?" the first one said. "It's the tiniest ring I've ever seen." Brina's head snapped toward them. "A ring?" "Certainly, my lady," the second woman agreed. "Hundreds have tried already. It seems unlikely anyone will fit it." "Perhaps the Alpha King has gone mad," the first woman said. "He looked quite unwell, didn't he? All pale and trembling. A ring. He was using the ring." He remembered. Brina had to get inside. Now. She waited until the guards were distracted, then darted toward a side entrance. Shouts erupted behind her. "Stop! Stop that woman!" But Brina was already running. She ducked down corridors, following the sound of voices. Guards pounded after her, but she was small and quick and desperate. She burst through double doors into a throne room so vast it took her breath away. Hundreds of women packed the space, all craning to see the center where Carden stood on a raised dais. He looked terrible, pale as death, dark circles under his eyes, swaying slightly. But he was alive. As Brina watched, he took the hand of a young peasant girl and slipped a tiny ruby ring onto her finger. It didn't fit. He shook his head, and the girl stepped away, disappointed. "I think that's everyone, my lord," said a man beside him. Brina recognized Carden's friend from the village. A guard's hand clamped over Brina's mouth from behind, trying to drag her back. She thrashed, but he was too strong. "Right," Carden said. "But then again, this ring has to belong to someone, doesn't it?" He paused. "Well, come to think of it, what about the old woman who let me stay the night in her cottage when I fell ill 3 days ago? I haven't seen her yet." The guard holding Brina suddenly went still. She bit down hard on his hand. He yelped and released her, and she stumbled forward into the crowd. People gasped and pointed. The sea of women parted, leaving a clear path to the dais. "Well, there she is, I guess," Carden's friend said through his teeth, staring at Brina. Carden looked at her too, his face carefully neutral. In his hand, she could see her mother's ring. "Are you the old woman who helped me the other night?" Carden asked. "Yes, Your Majesty," Brina said. He gestured for her to approach, then to kneel. She climbed the steps and knelt before him. "Give me your hand," he said. She held it out, gnarled and spotted and trembling. "You understand that whoever wears this ring instantly becomes my wife?" Carden asked, meeting her eyes. Inside, Brina was screaming with joy. "Yes, Your Majesty." "You'll try it on then?" Brina nodded, holding up her hand. She'd kept her hood up, shadowing her face. The crowd could see a bent, stinking old crone, but they couldn't see her features clearly. Carden took her hand. His was cold and clammy, trembling slightly. He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Everyone gasped. "Well, I guess this makes you my wife then," Carden said, triumph blazing in his eyes. He took her hand and helped her to her feet. As she rose, she reached up and pulled back her hood. The crowd gasped again, louder this time. Where the old crone had knelt, a beautiful young princess now stood. "What just happened?" Carden's friend asked, his eyes wide. "Elian," Carden said, still looking at Brina. "This is Princess Brina, my mate." Brina smiled back, tears streaming down her cheeks. They moved toward each other at the same moment, crashing together in a fierce embrace. Then he kissed her, deep and desperate and relieved. "I was so worried you wouldn't wake up," she whispered against his lips. "I'm fine," he said, though he swayed slightly against her. "You're not." She pulled back, searching his face. He was still too pale, still too weak. "We're married, but not mated yet. You said if I could come to you, you would claim me properly." "Seriously, what is going on?" Elian asked again, looking around at the stunned crowd. "Should we complete the bond now?" Brina asked urgently. "Now would be very good, yes," Carden said, resting his forehead against hers. He straightened, raising his voice so the entire room could hear. "I, Carden, Alpha King of the Northern Territories, claim you, Brina, as my mate. My soul to yours, my life to yours, from this day until my last day. I, Brina, Princess of Eldoria, claim you, Carden, as my mate," she said, her voice strong and clear. "My soul to yours, my life to yours, from this day until my last day." The bond snapped into place like a physical thing, a golden thread connecting her heart to his. She gasped at the intensity of it. Warmth flooded through her, through him, and she watched color return to his cheeks. His eyes brightened. His trembling stopped. "Well, at least he looks better," Elian muttered. Carden cupped Brina's face in both hands and kissed her again, deeper this time, pouring everything into it. The crowd erupted around them, but Brina didn't hear any of it. She'd found her mate once more. Epilogue. Brina woke to sunlight streaming through the tall windows of Carden's chambers and the warmth of his arm draped across her waist. Their chambers now, she supposed, though even after 3 days she still couldn't quite believe it was real. She turned carefully, not wanting to wake him, just to look at him, to reassure herself he was truly all right. The color had returned to his face completely. No more pallor, no more dark circles. His breathing was deep and even, his features relaxed in sleep. He looked healthy, whole, alive. As if sensing her gaze, his eyes fluttered open, green and bright and clear. "Good morning, wife," he murmured, his voice rough with sleep. His arm tightened around her, pulling her closer. "Good morning, husband," she whispered back, still marveling at the word. At the golden thread she could feel constantly now, connecting her heart to his. Carden kissed her forehead, her nose, her lips. "How are you feeling?" "I should be asking you that," Brina said, running her hand down his chest, checking for fever out of habit. His skin was warm but not hot. Perfect. "You're the one who was dying a week ago." "I'm fine." He caught her hand and brought it to his lips. "Better than fine. The bond is complete. I can feel you all the time now. It's like having the sun inside my chest." She smiled, understanding exactly what he meant. She could feel him too, a constant presence, warm and steady and safe. "What are you thinking about?" Carden asked, tracing patterns on her shoulder. "Oberon," she admitted. "He's still out there, still searching for me. He won't give up my kingdom easily." Carden's expression hardened. "Then we'll take it back. Together." He propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at her seriously. "I've already sent word to my generals. We'll march on Eldoria within the month, once we have proof of his crimes. Your mother's servants, the ones who survived, they'll testify. We'll expose him for the murderer he is." "You'd do that?" Brina asked softly. "Risk your people for my kingdom?" "You're my mate," he said simply. "Your fight is my fight. Besides," his eyes glinted with something dangerous, "he cursed you. He tried to force you into marriage. He made you suffer for 5 years." His hand cupped her face gently, at odds with the steel in his voice. "No one hurts what's mine and gets away with it." Warmth flooded through her, through the bond. "I love you," she said. The words felt inadequate for what she felt, but they were all she had. "So do I," Carden said, kissing her deeply. "My soul knows you, remember?" She smiled against his lips. Outside, the kingdom was waking. There were plans to make, battles to prepare for, a throne to reclaim. But right now, in this moment, wrapped in her mate's arms with the sun warming their bed, Brina had everything she needed.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this story.